Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video we're going to be doing something a little bit different from my previous videos, which focus heavily on using the Mr. Weathering pigments, which has been great and has taught me a lot about how to use oils, but I think it's time to level up and start to use some actual oil paints, as I've heard so many good things about them and their ability to up your miniature painting game. There are many different ways that you can use oil paints to improve your miniature painting. However, today, for this first foray into oil painting, I'm going to be trying to keep things simple and using the oils to create washes and filters to see what kind of effects they can achieve in comparison to your standard GW washes. And the model I'm going to be using is the Flesheater Courts Abhorrant Gorewarden. So let's get into it. Before we get into the oil painting part of the process, we first of all need to build up a nice base of colours on the model. And to do that I'm going to be using acrylics. So firstly, starting from a black undercoat, I'm going to apply a base coat of Army Painter Alien Purple, which is a nice dark purple that we can use across the model for our shadow tone. And I'm just going to apply this over the entire model, only leaving the very deepest recesses still in the black primer. Next up, I'm going to be applying the base coat for the skin, and to do that I'm going to be using Army Painter Royal Blue. And similar to the last layer, I'm going to be applying this to all of the skin area, only leaving the deepest recesses left in the purple. Next up, I'm going to be painting in the base coat for all of the wings, and to do that I'm going to be using Army Painter Basilisk Red, which is a really nice cool red, which will be perfect for this base coat. And at this stage I'd also painted in the dismembered corpse and the skulls on the base of the model in the same Basilisk red as the previous step. Getting them ready to be painted up, firstly with the corpse, using Army Painter Dorado skin. And then painting the skulls with Army Painter Skeleton Bone. Next I decided to paint up all of the rocky terrain on the base, and to do that I used Army Painter Uniform Grey. And I'm just going to spray this onto all of the rocks onto the base, leaving plenty of the previous purple base coat left behind, which will help tie in the base with the rest of the model. Next up, I'm going to start to highlight up the skin, firstly using Army Painter Hydra Turquoise. And this will just be a spot highlight to all of the upward facing surfaces, leaving plenty of the previous blue colour left behind, as I still want the model to read overall as blue. Next I'm going to add a second spot highlight to all of the skin, and to do that I'm going to be using Army Painter Emerald Forest. And this is a really nice vivid green and should help add a little bit of visual interest to the skin. Next it's time to highlight the wings, and I'll be using Army Painter Spellbound Fuchsia, which is a really nice bright magenta, and I'm just going to be applying this in a triangle shape onto each section of the wings, making sure that I leave plenty of the previous cool red left behind, still visible. Next I'm going to apply the final highlight to the wings, and to do that I'm going to use Daller Rowney Peach Pink. And this is just a standard Caucasian flesh tone, And I'm just going to apply this to the very centre of each of the tips of the wing segments. It was at this point when I started to paint in all of the spines on the wings, and I first of all decided to try and brush this in, just using the same colours that I airbrushed onto the main part of the skin. However, once I was finished, I didn't like the final look, as the brushed on part was a totally different tone from the rest of the airbrushed skin. So I made the decision to just start from scratch with the wings and airbrush the spines in first, and then go back in and follow the exact same process I just did to paint and highlight the wing membrane. And in the end I was much happier with the result, as they now fitted in with the tone of the rest of the skin. Next up, I needed to paint in all of the little fiddly bits on the model, all of the bits that were generally too small for the airbrush. And after doing a little bit of testing with some base colours, I started to paint up all of the horns, claws, and the bone necklace on the model as well. And to do this, I used the Army Painter Deep Skin Triad, and I just base coated all of these areas in the darkest colour in the Triad, which is the obsidian skin, and just worked my way up the Triad with the brighter colours covering a smaller and smaller area until we reach the tip or the highest point of each part. And I'm just using basic layering here, and if needed I can go back in and smooth out any transitions that I don't like. And for all of the gold parts on the model, I base coated in the same Basilisk red that I used to base coat the wings, and then just applied a single coat of Army Painter Tainted Gold. And for the leather belt on the model, I just used Army Painter Bootstrap Brown, highlighted with Army Painter Desert Yellow. And then for the rope that's tied around the rock around the base, I used Oak Brown, Dryad Brown and Ruddy Umber from the Army Painter Ruddy Brown Triad. And finally, for all of the cloth on the model, I base coated in the same Basilisk red that I used in previous steps, and then just highlighted it up with all of the colours from that Triad, which is the Cool Reds Triad. I'll put a list down below of which parts I painted up here and which paints I used for each part. And after all of that, the model is finally ready for the oil washes. But before that, I applied a quick coat of gloss varnish to the entire model, just to protect it from the next stage, just in case anything I do damages the paintwork we've done down below. So I prepped all of the equipment I would need for this next part, which was a couple of cheap synthetic brushes, a metal paint palette for all of the oil paints, and some metal paint cleaning cups for the white spirit solvent we'll be using. And last but not least, I will need all of the oil paints that I'm going to be using. And I didn't really notice it here at the time, but a couple of these tubes are actually acrylics. But I soon figured that out once I tried to mix them with white spirits. And it was simply a case of mixing in the colours that I wanted with a bit of white spirit to mix up a wash or a filter. So starting with the skin, I mixed in a green and a blue oil with a little touch of black to darken it up a little bit, and then just added some odourless white spirits and mixed it up until I was happy with the consistency, and then just applied this over all of the skin on the model, which should then flow into all of the recesses on the model, giving us that much needed shade and contrast to the already vibrant flesh tone. And I just followed this exact same process for all of the shades that I mixed up, which was a magenta and black shade for the wings, a red and black shade for all of the cloth, a brown and black shade for all of the leather, ropes and metallics, and finally a black shade for all of the rocks on the base of the model. And I just applied these all one at a time until the model was completely coated with oil washes. And once everything's been coated, it's time to go in and start the removal process. And there's multiple ways you can go about this, but I prefer using a combination of small little makeup brushes, which I use for areas where I just want to remove a little bit of the oil from the very top surfaces, like for the skin in this model. And then for other areas that I want to remove more of the oil wash and reveal more of the under highlights, like the wings, I'll use a clean synthetic brush with a little bit of the white spirits on the tip. It really just depends on how much of the oil that you want to remove. So I'll be switching between both during this process. And after that, I allowed 24 hours for all of the oil on the model to dry, before applying a coat of matte varnish to the entire model to take away all of the shine from the gloss varnish and all of the oils. And at this stage you could just leave it at that, but I decided just to go in and apply a few select highlights across the model. More specifically, I used a nice ice blue to highlight all of the raised areas on the face, just to bring out the highlights a little bit more. I also did the same thing to the bones on the base of the model, just using a light bone colour, again to bring out the highlights. And I also went back in with the Tainted Gold to highlight up the dulled down metallics. But apart from that, the model is complete and based and ready to go. And as far as using the oils goes, I really enjoyed the whole process, and it was nowhere near as difficult as I thought it might be. And I really like the way they provide a really nice shade and tone to the model without taking away from any of the vibrancy like some other washes do. So I'm definitely going to be employing this technique more often, and I'm also going to be exploring some of the other techniques you can achieve with oil paints, such as blending the oil paints directly onto the model, as opposed to using them as a wash or filter. But that'll be for another video. And as always, I hope you enjoyed and found this video useful. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. And I'll catch you in the next one.